What up, everybody? I'm sorry, hit my thing. What up, everybody? I am back. The Kingdomhood conversation. Back after a long absence. Um, and I missed the hell out of you guys. By the way, those you know me, my name is Richard Harrison. And starting last April, I did this show every Friday. Had a lot of good guests on. I had my son on. I had Ron Jenkins on to give us his expertise on police. I had Dwight on and a few other guests. So this year is going to be more of the same. But hey, let me get to why I've been gone so long. I actually got suspended on Facebook. They suspended me for 30 days. Can you believe it? They suspended me, the nice one, the good guy, the guy that's non-attacking, right? The guy that is just goes along to get along, kiss and love and respect everybody. You can't believe that? They suspended me for 30 days. Okay, so let me get into exactly why. All right, so as I usually do, going in on some, Trump supporters, this white lady was saying something stupid to me. And I called her an evil white devil. And because of that, Facebook suspended me for 30 days because I called her an evil white devil. I'm like, wait a minute. She called me a name, and then I replied back and called this white lady an evil white devil, which she is. She was all three of them, evil, white, and a devil. I guess you don't need to call nobody evil and the devil. But I was in that mood at that time. And I said that stuff, you know what I mean? Like I do. I said it. And they suspended me. I was like, man, 30 days just for that. So that's why I've been gone. That happened January 4th, just before the Trump clan went down to the Capitol. And I was so mad because I would have loved to come in and talk about that to you guys and just go in on them Klansmen. But, I was suspended. But I got a way around that. It's all good. I'm going to be going over into a podcast pretty soon. So you guys can come on a podcast and follow me there. But that started January 4th, and then February 4th, just a bunch of things going on in February. So, it's only, the 18th, I think, 16th or 17th. So, last couple of weeks. So I decided just to come give you guys just a pop-up show. I don't really have a lot of topics today, like I will next week and the week after that, the week after that. But I just want to, let you guys know I'm back in the groove. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. As far as me showing and speaking on Facebook Live, I haven't got any pushback from Facebook. But when I wrote comments and arguing with these Trump devils and these white supremacists, they want to suspend me. So I'm just not going to comment on that anymore. That's why you guys haven't seen me, blast out any comments on about politics or calling white people names or And again, I want to be clear. We're talking about racist white people. And not all white people are bad. So I want to make sure that's clear. And we talk about these Trump supporters. That's why I haven't done that, because next time they may suspend me for 6 months. You know what I mean? I don't know. So I'm just, not gonna do that anymore. So I can keep the show going. All right. So I do want to talk about a couple of things, though. It's funny how. Let me go back, because like I said, I haven't got a chance to talk about Trump, and after this I'm gonna leave him alone. But even though this man is still relevant, this is the thing is, you have 72,000 people, 72 million people that voted for Trump. So just because Trump is out of office doesn't mean he's irrelevant. This man is still relevant and still powerful in the Republican Party. But all this time, we saw the Republican Party just ignore what Trump was doing. They turned a deaf ear because why? Because they wanted that power. They base. So they let this man tell over 35,000 lies, be a racist, a xenophobe, a homophobe, every other phobe you can think of. And then when it finally came to meet his head, or when it finally turned into a collision or a train wreck, I should say, then wait a minute. Only some of them jump ship. Some of them were still making excuses for this clown, even though he incited that riot that we saw on January 6th. They were there because of him. They represented him. They went to the Capitol because they were directed by him. And of course, the Senate let him go. Now, we knew that was going to happen. I'm not sure why the Democrats want to waste their time and go through that process with Trump, because we knew the Senate wasn't going to do anything anyway. But you know what I see most about that incident, about the insert. Well, let me tell you, the terrorist attack on the Capitol by the white supremacists is throughout this country, and throughout this country, you've seen it. Well, not seen, but we've read about history books, and some of you who are older, and you know, I've seen that when you threaten white power, there's always a backlash. You know what I mean? I talked about this in some of my previous shows. When we started developing Rosewood, they burned it down. When we started building our own economic system in Tulsa, that was a threat to white power, so they bombed it. You got throughout the 60s, we had our leaders like, Malcolm X murdered, Martin Luther King murdered. You got the Black Panther Party. You got Fred Hampton murdered. You got Bunchy Carter that was murdered at UCLA in his dorm room. You know, anytime you threaten white power, there's a backlash that's coming. History has shown us that that's going to happen. And what you saw at the Capitol was white people feeling threatened, feeling their power being threatened. That's what the key to that is. That's why I thought about that. And it happens every time. I mean, you can go back and read any history book you want. When we passed the Voter Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act of 64, or the Voting Rights Act of 65. After that, there was violent backlash. You know, you can go through any of the amendments that they passed, 13th, 14th Amendment. After those, it was violent backlash. Anytime there is a threat to white power, we are going to get a backlash. Now you've seen that Trump is lost, he's out of office, because you have to understand, when the voting populace goes up, Democrats win. When the voting populace goes down, Republicans win, right? That's why the Republicans are about voter suppression and the Democrats are about voter expansion. So why do I say that? If you go back to 2013, the Supreme Court gutted the Civil Rights Act, Section 4. I talked about this in my previous shows. There's a pre-clearance in there that what it did is that the states, before they can change their voting laws, they had to get pre-clearance from the government. Okay. Well, Justice Roberts struck that down in 2013. After that, every state in the South, Texas waited 2 hours to pass a voter ID law. Then you had Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, North Carolina. North Carolina, the federal judge ruled that North Carolina, that these voting laws and voter restrictions that they were trying to implement, targeted Black people with absolute surgical precision. So now, and the reason I'm saying this is because the GOP now is trying to implement a lot of new voter restriction laws. You see that? Anytime there's progression, you got a Black man and a Jew that took over Georgia, and a Black that was spearheaded by a Black woman. That is a threat. That is a threat to white power. That's a threat to white power. So what happens is all those southern states are now trying to put in voter ID laws. Here's particular ones. They're trying to stop early voting. So you guys got to pay attention. Who votes early for the most part? Black folks. They're trying to stop voting on Sunday. They actually, North Carolina actually did a survey that said to try to find out when African Americans vote the most. And what the survey found out was that African Americans vote early voting and they vote on Sunday. So then what North Carolina did back in 2015, I guess it was, what they tried to do was knock out those two things that 2 times the vote that African Americans use the most, right? So now in Georgia, they're doing the same thing. They're trying to end early voting and stop voting on Sunday. They're doing that in them southern states. You see that? Every time there's progression, there's a white backlash because you're threatening white power. Anything that Black folks has progressed in, white folks get scared, right? And they come up with all these new laws. But what's so funny is this, is any other race could rise and do an insurrection or try to fight back against something. And I don't believe the government is going to be as scared as they are of African Americans. That's because all the other races don't. You got the Asians that are pretty much quiet and don't say much. They keep their head down and work. You got the Jews that are getting everything. You got the Arabs that don't do a whole lot. You got Latinos that pretty much stay in their corner. You know, they have done more so than any other race that I know of. But it's really Black people that have spearheaded civil rights and progression in this country. And what's so intriguing about that is every other race has pretty much jumped on our backs. We are the only race that was brought to this country by forced migration. Every other race came here, whether you Asian, Latino, Arab, East Indian, anywhere else in the country, you came here through voluntary immigration. But all those laws, that the voting laws and everything that other races enjoy, were here because Black people fought first. But you know, you kind of, but those other races that I know for sure look side-eyed at us. Not all. And again, let me be clear. I'm not talking about everybody in everybody, because that's not that would be unfair, because I wouldn't want people to say black people or all Black people are like this. So I want to be clear. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that for the most part, that is the case for whatever reason, because they listen to the news and it gives them their ideas of who we are instead of getting to know us and everything like that. So we're back at this again. You see Biden win. You see a lot of these red states turn blue. And what happens? The Republicans go haywire and try to come up with voter population, because the Democratic Party is the biggest party. That's why Democrats are all for voter expansion. You would never see the Democratic Party trying to suppress the vote. Have you noticed? It's always the Republicans doing that. It's always the Republicans trying to come up with these voter ID laws that are unnecessary. When voter fraud, and I've researched this, you know, to a great in-depthness, if that's a word, that they do it based on voter fraud. That's what they say, voter fraud, right? Well, voter fraud is so small and insignificant that it's not even worth passing a law for. There were studies that it was a Republican think tank, conservative think tank, that did a research on voter fraud. And what they found, over a 10-year period, they looked at over 1 billion ballots, and they found less than 10 voter ID frauds. And most of those were due to user error or some type of innocent mistake. Somebody just made an innocent mistake. So voter fraud is virtually non-existent. So the question you have to ask yourself, why is the Republican Party doing all these voter ID fraud, doing all these voter ID laws based on violations of the law that virtually don't exist? Well, the only thing the answer is they want to suppress the vote and decrease the voting population so they can win. That's just pretty much what it is. And you have to understand that, because Republicans will tell you is that there's voter ID fraud and all this other stuff. And that is absolutely just not the case. It virtually does not exist. So, yeah. So here, give me a second, guys. I'm going to type something in real quick before I go on. I want to show something real quick. I'm going to add a caption in. And let me add this in here real quick. I have to do this, guys. Give me a second. So give me a minute, and then I'm going to go over to Texas. What's going on in Texas, man? It's I'm very endeared to what's going on in Texas. Sorry about the brief time out there, but I'm very intrigued in what's going on in Texas. Is because my son lived there. My son lived there. My dad lived there. I got my brother live down there. My sister lives there. I got cousins. I got everything. So I tell you, it's sad what's going on down there. It's sad, and I think it'll pass. This storm will pass. But you got 30,000 people without electric power, without water. You got people who are melting ice to drink because the water is getting low. No heat. Food. I mean, you got leaks in the house. I mean, they said some stuff on the news where rain was just gushing. Water was gushing inside these people's home. And with the frigid temperatures, it's really been a horrific situation for the people in Texas. Now, my dad's power went off, and he went over my son, so he stayed over there. And I talked to my son yesterday. He was doing okay. The day before yesterday, and I called him yesterday morning. He hasn't got back to me yet, so. So I'm just hoping everything's going okay with them, and they're, they got some power and things like that. But when you look at from the people who manage the state, and you look at the Republican governor who got up there and made all these old lame ass excuses. In fact, he didn't take any responsible for what happened in Texas. He blamed it on the wind turbines. At the end of the day, these Republicans, I think that's just a Donald Trump thing. You don't take responsibility for a damn thing. I mean, those people are out there suffering, and you're up here making these tired ass excuses, just saying it happens on my watch. I'm responsible for the people of Texas. And the fact that we were not prepared for this type of weather, it's my fault, and I'm going to make it right. No, he couldn't say that. He had to blame it on something else. And then we got old poor Ted Cruz. Oh my God, this clown. This Trump kiss ass, Trump. I mean, he got his nose so far up Trump's ass, it just don't make no sense. But anyway, this clown, actually, during this, horrific time, and a lot of people in Texas are suffering. Watch this fool on the news, and he's up there saying, "Well, my daughter and I, my daughter's asked, me, could we go to Cancun or take a trip with some friends, and me and my wife, being parents, said, okay, so I went to Cancun to stay in the Ritz-Carlton while my state is in total disarray, in total storm-ridden, people without power, without food, without water. I decide that I'm going to go to Cancun." So then he tried to lie, because that's what Republicans do. Look, there's lies on the Democrat Party too. Don't get me wrong, but I'm saying the Republicans following the Donald Trump mantra, they just lie, just blatantly lie. If you're gonna lie to me, at least tease me. Tell me a good lie, so I can be like, damn, man, you tricked me. You got me on that. I can't believe I got played. Let me do that. Don't tell me a lie that's just so obvious to insult my intelligence. So what he says was, I was going to go drop my kids off. Oh, so you got to get on a plane and you got to go to Cancun to drop your kids off. Well, I mean, your wife and your kids. You got to go. You got to go. Oh, yeah, that sounds about right, Ted. That sounds very believable, Ted. Now, what happened was he didn't know that his wife shared his itinerary with some of her friends. So even his group, his text group, blew him up, because the ticket what he planned on doing was going on Wednesday, and the ticket didn't have him coming back until Sunday. So then he kind of got called on the carpet, and then he decided to come on back. Then he tried to go on Fox News, and Sean Hannity is gonna throw him a softball, and not gonna ask the hard questions and let him weasel his way out of it. But he left that state in disarray. Okay. And didn't even care. He didn't give a damn about the people he's with. I mean, that he's responsible for. I mean, I don't think nobody's really expecting him to go out there and shovel snow, but damn, pass out food, deliver water, something. You got OKC from the Democratic Party that has raised over $1 million to help the state of Texas. Okay, these are Democrats. You got Beto O'Rourke, the candidate who lost to Ted punk-ass Cruz, has raised $250,000 to help seniors. And these are Democrats helping a Republican state. But then you got Ted punk-ass, idiot, kiss-ass Cruz that decides he wants to get on a plane and go to Cancun, right? And then he's such a weasel. Then he's going to say, well, my daughter said, could we take a trip? And so you mean tell me, you are a spineless jellyfish if you're going to throw your daughters under the bus. Damn, man. Stop trying to convince me that fat meat ain't greasy. Just say, I just wanted to go to Cancun. I wanted to get the hell out of here. But the real thing would be, the man thing would have been, if you really cared about the people of Texas, what you would have done is, sent your family. Say, hey, y'all get out of here. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to be here with the people of Texas. I'm going to get out here and pass out food, pass out water, do a, get out there, do a news show and tell them that, you're behind them, you stand with them, whatever it is you need to do as a politician. But you didn't do that. No, because you don't give a damn about what's going on. I got a lot of family in Texas, so this really sets home to me. But here's the deal. These people in Texas, you got to get that clown out of office. 2022, Ted's punk ass need to go. He is showing you he don't care. And then you had Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas, said the people of Texas should just deal with the outage to prevent getting money from the feds. In other words, getting help from the government. Okay. Yeah, I got you. That sounds good too. You probably got heat, gas, or electric power, or water and food in your house. So it's easy for you to talk that nonsense. But the people who are suffering, that's the message you have for them? Okay. All right. Well, our thoughts and our prayers are with Texas. This too will pass, and they'll get through it with absolutely no help from the Republican Party, no help from them clowns. But anyway, that's what it is. That's what they're dealing with, and hopefully they'll do something about it. When it's time to vote. So this is probably one of my favorite months of the year, Black History Month. We honor all our African Americans who have done so much, for this country. So, I'm gonna talk briefly about, my particular heroes. I got several of them, but I guess I'm gonna mention two because, they're like, they were like freedom fighters. I like freedom fighters. I like people who fight back. There is a time for, we shall overcome, and, we just want to be your friend, we just want to be, peaceful with you and all that type of stuff. But then there's a time for war. I think it says that in the Old Testament. There's a time for peace. There's a time for war. And particularly my particular African-American heroes were people who knew it was time for war, and they did that. So the first one is Francois Toussaint Louverture, the great Haitian warrior. Now the country used to be called San Domingo before it was the name was changed to Haiti. But this man here is probably one of the greatest leaders and generals in the history of the world. And I say that because I say that the African leaders, who fought white power, who fought against white armies, are much more strategic, much more, have more courage, and are better generals than any American general. Because an American general, where there's Westmoreland, or Washington, or Patton, or Eisenhower, or any of these generals, they had the power of the American army. They had the best military weaponry in the world, technology, fighters, well-trained fighters, so if you're the best military in the world, you're supposed to win. It's some of these wars that America went into was like Woody Allen challenging Mike Tyson for the heavyweight champion of the world. Mike Tyson's supposed to win. Okay, so what's so great about these American white generals? They were fighting. Now, don't get me wrong, the Japanese in World War II wasn't no joke. You know, World War I, these guys fought. You had Germany and Japan, and all those countries that did fight back. So no, don't get me wrong. It was like, I'm saying it's an easy war, especially in Vietnam, because everybody says Vietnam got our asses whooped. But anyway, I don't want to take battle lightly, but when you're a Toussaint Louverture and you have spears and just men with a lot of heart, and you're fighting the French, which was the biggest military at that time, that outmanned you, outgunned you, and everything else. And Toussaint Louverture was able to train and psychologically prepare his soldiers to fight Napoleon and the French army, because you had Britain, you had England, and you had France, that in the late 1700s were the probably the premier three armies in the world, powerful countries in the world, especially Napoleon. He wanted to control all of Europe. In fact, Napoleon wanted to control the world. He's extremely powerful. He was smart and extremely evil. And he had the biggest army in the world. So this dude Napoleon was rough, and nobody else in the world really wanted to mess with him, especially America, because at this time America was pretty much just a weak country. We didn't have a big military. We didn't have, America wasn't the way what you see it is now. Okay, so anyway, to get back to Toussaint Louverture, this man was a slave till he's about 50, and his master, he was a good little slave, and his master freed him about 50. And then he saw what was going on. He saw England and France trying to take over the island of San Domingo. Now, here's why everybody wanted the San Domingo. 2/3 of the world's cotton supply came off that island. So France controlled San Domingo. So that's what made Napoleon rich, was San Domingo. And all the other countries wanted that. So there was always war about that. About that particular country. But it was controlled by France. So what Napoleon did was train a bunch of ex-slaves. Now you got to understand that. That's like me going to get some gangbangers off the street. I'm going to get some Crips, and I'm going to get some Bloods, right? And then we're going to go challenge the U.S. military. We wouldn't have a chance, right? We wouldn't have a chance at that. But Toussaint Louverture was able to take ex-slaves with no military background and train them physically, psychologically, in the art of war, and defeated France. An army that was, I can't remember the exact number because I haven't read the book in a while, but France has like 100,000 soldiers or more. And Toussaint may have had 20,000, I think. It could be somewhere less than that, but he was grossly outnumbered and still defeated the French. Okay, so why is this so significant? It's significant. It was significant to African Americans because it shows how creative we are and how we can go through insurmountable odds and still be successful. But why is this important to America? Because Jefferson, and this is something you got to know about history, is that Jefferson, if you read the history books, it will talk about Jefferson orchestrated the real estate deal of the century when he bought the Louisiana territory. That's pretty much all the South, and is a large part of America, the Louisiana Purchase. Well, the reason why Napoleon sold that territory to America is because Toussaint Louverture took over his island and bankrupted Napoleon. So Napoleon was forced to sell the land to America because a black slave turned military genius took all his wealth away by stripping him of all his cotton, because at that time, cotton was 90%, 85% of America's export. And it was the premier commodity in the market was cotton. And who was picking cotton? Us. And that's why America got rich, 300 years of free slavery. But when Napoleon lost that stronghold on San Domingo, it bankrupted him. So he said to America, him and Jefferson talked, and he said, look, I'll give you this for little or nothing. And a large part of America, which is all the South and up and through the Midwest and all that, that was part of the Louisiana Territory of 1804. And that's why Jefferson was able to get that land. Because look, Napoleon was not scared of America. You have to ask yourself these questions. Why would the most powerful, evilest, control freak, Napoleon complex, that's where I come from, because Napoleon was short, why would he just give land away? Why would he sell land virtually for nothing when this man wanted to control the whole world? He wanted to control all of Europe. He wanted it all, and almost was successful. But and that's what made me start doing research, because I was always curious of why did Napoleon sell this land to Jefferson for pretty much nothing? And to come to find out, it was because of an African slave, indirectly taking his land from him and bankrupt Napoleon. He had to sell it. So, but you won't learn that in school. They won't teach that in school because they don't want you to know that type of thing. All right, so Napoleon was defeated by Toussaint Louverture, gave America, and indirectly was responsible. I say directly, but you could, arguably directly, but definitely indirectly responsible for America expansion in 1804. Toussaint Louverture. And then Nat Turner, the rebellion. I got that 1835, I believe it was, when he organized. Let me say this real quick. During slavery, if you watch any of these slave movies, they kind of portray Black folks as docile and in roots. You see, 12 years of slaves and all that type of stuff. There was 250 slave revolts between, I believe it was 1596 somewhere in 1865. During the period of slavery, there were 250 slave revolts. You can't find a movie nowhere about that because they don't want you to know. They don't want you to know that them Africans were not just singing "We Shall Overcome" and all that type of stuff and singing Negro spirituals. They were at war constantly, and white people were scared. I mean, were really scared of these slaves, and they should have been. Because look, if you're gonna torture somebody, make them work from can't see day to can't see night for free in harsh conditions. You don't feed them, you don't clothe them, you beat them, rape them, castrate them, torture them. You should be scared of them. You should be, because pretty soon you only take so much. So Nat Turner was probably one of the greatest rebellions. And then you got, Denmark Vesey and Gabriel Prosser were already also people who rebelled too. But Nat Turner was a spiritual man, and he read, he learned to read from his master. White people kind of liked him actually, so he got to learn to read, and he became very well versed in the Bible because the Bible pretty much was given to Black people, but it was given to Black people in a way to keep them docile. In fact, Black preachers could only preach to Black slaves with a white person present to make sure they only get in a watered down version of the Bible, and to make sure that what they're being taught, make sure that they stay slaves. Well, he was able to get the Bible, be able to read the full version of the Bible. And he really felt that God ordained him to rebel. So one night he ends up getting some guys together, and to make a long story longer, he ends up rebelling against and starting a war, became a freedom fighter. And for, over a week or so, he was just going around killing white folks. He had white people so scared. There are white people who lost their mind. There are white people who committed suicide. There are white people who left the city because they were scared of this Black slave turned militant. They just got tired of being a slave, got tired of Black people got tired of being treated like a slave and being brutalized and tortured, and just blew up and rebelled and had them people scared. Let me tell you something. When they caught Nat Turner, okay, they were so afraid of him that when they hung him, they cut his body up into little pieces. They took his skull and his brain and took it and gave it to scientists to research, to find out what was it about this Negro that made him rebel and start killing all these white people. He killed all kind of white people. I mean, brutally murdered them, because it was at that point where he just got tired of it. So Nat Turner, that's my man. Look, at that time, that was the thing to do. I mean, I would have been right there with him, because I'd rather have died, at a young age than be an old slave. That's just the way I'm doing it. So anyway, there's another one, Shaka Zulu. Shaka Zulu is one of my guys too. Shaka Zulu was an outright warrior. He really was. And he fought against the British. The British had guns and all that stuff. And Shaka Zulu was so, like Toussaint Louverture, he was such a military genius that his army would appear and reappear in different places, like almost like magical. Shaka Zulu would actually have his soldiers dug into the mud. So when them British soldiers would walk by, they get up with a spear and just run a spear through their neck. And the British had guns. And all the black soldiers, Shaka Zulu, and they just had spears. And Shaka Zulu was still able to win. He was still able to strike fear in the heart of the British and the French, whoever was coming to, try to, take on his army. So Shaka Zulu too. They wanted to look at his brain and see what was right. What was it about this dude? White people are still intrigued about how Shaka Zulu was become such a military genius. So Shaka Zulu, Toussaint Louverture, and Nat Turner, my three heroes. They were warriors. So I just gave you a brief about them. There's a lot more to it. So I can move up a little bit. And some of the common ones. So you got Frederick Douglass, you got Monroe Trotter, of course. There's, Fannie Lou Hamer. Of course, you got Martin Luther King. People don't know that Martin Luther King was a radical. Yes, he was. Malcolm X. Then you got, Medgar Evers. You got Marcus Garvey. You got all the Black Panther parties. You got Fred Hampton. You got Stokely Carmichael. Bobby Seals, of course, Huey Newton, and all these black icons that really tried to stand up and they pretty much risked their life, risked it all on the line, because they saw their people in a position that they wanted to make better. They want to dedicate themselves to the people and of helping, and they gave their life for it. So my hat's off to them. My hat's off to all my forefathers before me, who sacrificed everything so I can sit up here on this show and say whatever the hell I want. And I have to go through what they've gone through. But you have to understand something of why African-American people, I believe, are the greatest people in this country. Not because we're better in any other way, but what I'm saying is there's no race that has been through what we've been through in this country and has been able to fight through and survive. No other race knows what that feels like. Not Indians, not Mexicans, not Asians, not Arabs, none of them. None of them have been through. And I can go into depth. Slavery was one thing, right? But I haven't even talked about the medical. I just read this book called The Medical Apartheid, where to do all these surgical advancements that we able to, I can't say enjoy, but able to take advantage of today. In the early 1700s and 1800s, all these surgeries, especially the gynecological stuff for women, all those were practiced on slaves. So what they would do is doctors would actually go to the slave owners and they would buy a slave. Sometimes the ones that were sick and weren't useful anymore, they would go and they would buy these slaves and they would practice surgery on them with no anesthesia, with no sterilization. So imagine, this is what slaves had to go through. So imagine me wanting to look at your abdomen, your abdomen, your abdomen wall, or I need to look at your liver. And I have people tie you down and people holding you down, and I operate on you while you're awake. That's what they did to slaves. And they did it for years. And even, I believe it was 1840, 50, somewhere around there, when they invented anesthesia, they still didn't give it to the slaves, even though it was available to them. because they didn't care. All the gynecological practices that women take advantage of today. They tortured, Keisha to save Becky. They would just, go up in these women slaves and just start picking and pulling and cutting stuff, and just leave them there just leave them there like that. So a lot of them died from infection. A lot of them died from hemorrhaging and bleeding to death. They just let them there, just tortured them. Yeah, so slavery was just one thing. The medical part of it was another. And I didn't really know that, right? I mean, we all know about slavery, right? We all know about slavery. But what a lot of us don't know is the medical torture, the medical treatment or experimentation that was done on slaves was just beyond human understanding. Just beyond human understanding. No other race has been through that here. So we can't take this lightly. And that's why it makes me mad when you have I see other minorities looking sideways as Black folks, because your ass probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for us. You would not have all the advancements. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 wasn't just for Black people. That was for Latinos. That was for the American Indian. That was for Asians. That was for Arabs. That was for East Indians. Because in 1974, Ford expanded it to be bilingual because, the voting rights, ballots and everything like that. He expanded to be bilingual. So King wasn't just fighting for Black folks. And Malcolm X and Medgar Evers and all these guys, they were fighting for everybody, because what Black people have done, all the other minority groups have been able to enjoy the benefits of that. I was watching Messiah and Black Messiah and Judas, and Fred Hampton, man, dude was 21 when they killed him, 21. But I didn't know that Fred Hampton, and the reason why they were so afraid of Fred Hampton from the Black Panther Party is because Fred Hampton had whites. He brought the poor whites together. He brought the Asians together. I'm sorry, the Latinos together. Right. And then he had went to other gangs and tried to get them to unite because he understood we're better together. That's a hell of a lot for a guy that's only 21 to do that. No, see, the thing is, we'll never know if white people or any other race can do that because they'll never go through it. They'll never go through it. And I was looking at how the police killed Bunchy Carter at UCLA. He's a Black Panther guy's party as well. And they killed Fred Hampton, right? Walked his home and shot him while he was asleep. But it was a Black dude that helped orchestrate this. He worked with the feds to tear the Black Panther Party down. I'm not surprised at what J. Edgar Hoover was doing or the FBI was doing to the Black Panther Party. What bothers me is the Negro that helped them. That's what burns my backside. But anyway, it'd be so nice if I could say, man, that was the past. Fred Hampton getting killed at home. What happened to, Bunchy Carter? What happened to, all the other African Americans that were beaten and killed and hung by police officers / Klansmen? That was the past. America has moved forward, but it hasn't. The same thing that happened to Fred Hampton happened to George Floyd or Breonna Taylor. Same thing. Ahmaud Arbery, same thing. So we see that from the 60s to 221, not much has changed. Not much has changed. They say, well, slavery is 100. Let me mention this. Look, again, I understand that some white people are just racist and evil. That's who they are. All right. These Trump supporters, those, like Dave Chappelle said, the same clown that's talking about Colin Kaepernick couldn't kneel, gonna storm the Capitol and kill a police officer, and Harley and them got killed. That's just a damn shame. But you have people like Herschel Walker talking about, well, slavery was over 130 years ago. See, Herschel Walker is a Sambo. he's not a coon. He's graduate. He's not an Uncle Tom, or he's not a house Negro, or a coon. He's graduated. He's a Sambo, and he's a Trump supporter. Herschel Walker, the football player, went to Georgia, played for Dallas and the Vikings or whatever. He's a pro football player. He grew up in the South, and what I think is he was discriminated against, did a lot of racism when he was younger. So he was beaten to submission. And I noticed that too many people in the South are just lost their balls, man. Just really lost their balls. But anyway, he was on some network talking about slavery ended 130 years ago. We need to forget about it. Okay. Obviously, there's either he can't read or he doesn't read, because that's not the case. Slavery did not end in 1835. Please read, people. If you know a black person, wish you were black, think you're black, half black, a third black, seen a black person on TV, just try reading a little history so you can kind of understand something. That way you're not played for a fool. Slavery, and I got some books I can suggest if you want to learn about history. But slavery did not end in 1865. What Lincoln did was transfer the power from the individual to the states. That's all he did. That's why the South say states' rights, because it means they can treat their black residents the way they want to. Slavery actually ended in 1945, because after slavery ended, they started sharecropping, and sharecropping was just slavery in a new name. Sharecropping was black folks would work the land for a piece of the land. They would try to work, and the white people would give them a piece of the land as they worked a certain amount of contract. But that never happened. Of course, they never got the land. And they created all these laws, vagrancy laws and petty laws, to lock black people up. And then what would happen is, because the 13th Amendment says slavery is illegal except if you commit a crime. So if you commit a crime, you can go right back to slavery. So even though the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment have passed, saying making slavery illegal, giving black folks citizenship, and giving black folks the right to vote. Once you went to jail, the plantation owners will come lease you from the prisons and then put you right back on the plantation. You got to work as a slave again, because they would make up these funny, like, arrest black people for nothing. They'd go before a judge. A judge would give them 5 years for vagrancy, being without a job, being out after dark, looking at a white person the wrong way, wearing the wrong clothes, send them to jail. And then what they would do was come get them and put them back on a slave plantation. That went until 1945. Okay? What I'm telling you happened till 1945. That is in my mother's lifetime. My mom was born in 1940. Slavery ended in 1945 as we know it, as that particular slavery. And the reason why it ended is because FDR, we were in the middle of World War II. And FDR didn't want the Germans and the Japanese to use the treatment of black folks against America. So in other words, when the black soldiers were going over to Germany, the Germans saying, why are you fighting for a people that enslaved you and treated you bad and raped your women and made you pick cotton and castrated you? This was over the loudspeaker. I was watching this documentary on World War II, and this was over the loudspeaker. This is what they were doing. So that's why FDR stopped the convict leasing program. So you're talking 1945. Black people were still slaves. And then what do? Nixon starts the war on drugs, which is in the 70s, early 70s, which means a war on black people. And then you had Ford, Carter, and Carter didn't really push it, but you had Reagan that really started giving black folks mandatory jail sentence for selling crack. And that's a whole nother thing I'm not going to go into right now. But they put crack in I'll be real brief. They put crack in our neighborhoods, and then they locked black people up for selling it. And then they threw us, and then they put mandatory sentences on crack cocaine, which was in the black neighborhoods, but didn't give any time for powder cocaine, which was more the white people. So it's powder, because powder was more expensive, and crack was a cheaper high. It was a better high. So that permeated, that really just saturated the black communities and Latino communities. So Reagan was the first one to give mandatory drug sentences. And then Clinton signed it into law. And then the prison population just exploded. So that was a new form of slavery. because based on the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment says slavery is illegal, but if you commit a crime, you can be put back into slavery. That is still the law today. So prisons are nothing but Mayflower. Mayflower is the ship that brought the slaves over across the Atlantic. It's nothing but a Mayflower on land. That's what prisons are. And you can buy stocks from prisons. Matter of fact, in the mid 90s, you had the CCCA, who the California Corrections Association, that actually were selling stocks on the stock market. So you can buy stocks in prisons, and they have private prisons. Now, here's the thing about a private prison: it's privately owned. How do you make money? You keep people in it. As long as they're private prisons, they're going to be ushering black people black and brown people back into these prisons. And that's another form of slavery. So people like Herschel Walker need to shut the hell up. Just don't say nothing. I know you want to be a coon. You want to be Uncle Tom. You want to be a Sambo. Fine, be a Sambo. If you want to put your nose up the white man's ass, you want to go on Fox News, you want to lick Trump's backside, that's fine, do that. But don't throw the rest of your people on a bus. Just stop it, okay? Here's another one, and I'm going to end by this. Reparations has been into the forefront, and Congress is looking at this. And there's a lot of, conversation about reparations. I'm a fan for getting reparations. Here's why I'm a fan of reparations. Because every other race has gotten it. The whites have got reparations. The whites, here's what's so funny about hypocritical about white people, is that white people are the biggest beneficiaries of reparations. After World War II, when the South was pretty much, blown to hell and destroyed because of the Civil War, the government gave millions of acres of land to white folks. Land grants, helped them build land and all that type of stuff. That's reparations. That's a handout from the government. After World War II, they had the GI Bill. The GI Bill was giving the soldiers that came home money to buy a house. Well, the government gave all the white people money, and they wouldn't give black folks money because they wouldn't insure loans to African-American soldiers who fought valiantly for this country. Wouldn't give them a home loan, but they give it to white people. That allowed white people to build suburbia. The government helped white people build the suburbs. In the meantime, put us all in these ghettos. If you look across the country, you look in LA, you look in Texas, you look in New Orleans, you look in Philly, you look in Boston, you look in New York, Chicago, all these ghettos and these projects, those were houses for war workers. During World War II, the government built those houses for two people who working on product for the war, and for white people who could afford a house but couldn't find it, because in the 40s there was a housing crisis. So the government stepped in and started building all these high-rise apartment buildings, high-rise projects. Well, after the war started, the government gave white people the money to move out of these projects and go into the suburbs and build suburbia and put all the black people in these projects. And they did what's called redlining. It was really drawing a red line saying white people live here, black people live here. Okay. So when you look at these projects across America, they were very, very upscale places when white people lived in. But when white people left, the resources left with them. And that's why black people are all in these projects, because it was a government, it was a government operation. It was privately organized, but government supported to strap black people to all these ghettos. That's why people, why are black people living in these ghettos? Well, that's a major reason why. Now, not all black people lived in those ghettos. Some people, black people, were able to move out and buy houses and all that stuff. And but they had no place else to live. You couldn't live in the suburbia. You had to live in these projects. In fact, there were black people in the 1940s that couldn't find any place to live because there was a housing shortage and you couldn't live in certain neighborhoods, right? And they had to live with friends, or they had to live way far from work. It was just tragic. So that's reparations that white people got. After World War II, the Jews got reparations because the Jews actually tried to come over here before the Holocaust happened, but America denied them. So America, and they had to go back to Germany. Hitler did what he did. So America felt guilty about what happened to the Jews. So when the Jews got over here, they gave them reparations. You can look this all up. World War II, Japanese in the internment camps. 1942, during World War II, we were fighting Japanese. Roosevelt put all the Japanese in internment camps, and held them there because they thought that they may be, Japanese spies, and they were worried about that. So they put them in. They took their homes from them, and this is the gangster thing. They took their all the Japanese people. They took their homes, and then what they do is they allowed the black people to move into their projects, because Asian people dealt with racism too. Japanese people deal with racism. The Chinese came over here in the 1850s to help build the railroads. They dealt with racism too, not nowhere to the extent that we dealt with it, but the Chinese and Japanese dealt with it as well. So anyway, so they were in internment camp. They lost their homes. Those Japanese people, they lost everything. They were pretty much homeless after they let them out, because where they were living, black folks, the government allowed the black people to move there because they didn't want them to move where the white folks were. So they said, well, take the homes that the Japanese people were living in. So in 1988, Reagan passed with almost overwhelming congressional approval to give Japanese people reparations. They got $20,000 per family. Now that's nothing compared to what they deserve. The Japanese people deserve more, but that's pretty much all. That's pretty much all they got. Yeah, so that's why I'm a fan for reparations. Why can't the people who built this country get reparations? I'm not sure you should give black people cash, but how about business loans? How about a break on taxes? How about free education? How about free health care? Do something, because the reason why America is rich is because the black people worked 300 years for free. Imagine this. You have a business and you're able to hire 100 people. And these 100 people work for you for 10 years for free. Don't you? And you go from, America was a fragmented 13 colonies in 1619. By 1865, they were a military, economic, and political power in the world. Number one in the world in all those. Why? Because all the money they made off the slaves of black folks. A slave was worth more than 10 times worth more than anything else. They were selling slaves for $1,200 in the 1800s. That's a lot of money in the 1800s. So you got rich off the back of slaves. America is what it is today because of slavery. It's because of how my ancestors worked for free, built this country on their backs. So why wouldn't you gave every other race or reparations? Why wouldn't you give it to African Americans? So that's why I think we should get it. I guess there's a debate of how it should be divvied out, but do something because you did it for everybody else. All right, man, that's my show. I was just kind of like just blabbering on and just sharing because I've been gone so long, and I just kind of want to just just kind of share my thoughts on certain things and just give you guys a taste of what's to come. I'm gonna be having some guests coming up here real soon on the show, and we'll cover a lot of topics. We cover politics, business, community, everything. I mean, just everything. I mean, how to be better people, how to be, better men, how to be better fathers, just how to be better people for our wives, how to be better. Everything. Just this show is about taking a hardcore look at yourself, starting from within and then working your way out. We take an inward out approach here at the Kingdomhood Conversation. We're not trying to blame everything on everybody else or look outward, but we're trying to look inward because at the end of the day, you have to be satisfied with who you see in the mirror. The only way you can do that is work on yourself in an honest and objective way. But we do talk about a lot of external things too, because I'm a firm believer that we have to look at what's going on in our communities, but we also have to look at what are we doing to cause what's going on in our communities and what can we do to make things better. Thank you guys for tuning in. God, the hour goes by so quickly. Yeah, we will see you guys next week, Friday at 5. Look for my post because my next post I'll have, topics and everything I'm gonna talk about. I'm trying to get my son on next week because I want him to kind of talk to us about what's going on in Texas. I'm trying to get him on next week or the week after. All right. So yeah, definitely have some interesting shows coming up for you guys. All right. So thanks for tuning in to the Kingdomhood Conversation. God bless you guys. Peace. We'll see you next week.